It is the Banner Ravens podcast. Paul Mancano and Jonas Shaffer live on a Sunday night in September. That's about as muted a response as you're going to get after the Ravens come out there tonight against the Kansas City Chiefs this afternoon and suffer a cataclysmic, a disastrous, a horrendous, awful loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, 37-20. We are going to break this one down from every angle, exactly what went wrong in this one, and we are going to have injury updates on the 5 starters that the Ravens lost in this game, including Lamar Jackson, Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith, Ronnie Stanley, and Nate Wiggins. And we'll wonder where the heck the Ravens go from here. All that and much, much more, but first a quick word from our sponsors.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, Jonas, we are going to recap the Ravens' 37-20 loss to the Kansas City Chiefs. Just so much to get into. Our word of the day is cataclysmic. You can look up the definition yourself. This would have been a horrendous loss if you just go by the score. If you just go by how it impacts the Ravens' record. They fall to 1-3 with this loss. But you could swallow a loss to the defending AFC champions on the road in week 4. It's not season ending. You could swallow that loss if it wasn't for the loss of 5 starters to injury, including quarterback Lamar Jackson in this game. And the injury woes started well before this game, as we know. Nnamdi Madubuike, who missed the week 3 game against the Detroit Lions, was ruled out for this game earlier this week, as was Broderick Washington, who was placed on IR with an ankle injury. So 2 guys already on IR to start this game, which means you're going to be without those guys for 4 games at the very least. Travis Jones, inactive for this game with a knee injury. That's 3 defensive linemen that you're without this game. Ronnie Stanley has an ankle injury all week. He tries to get through it, starts this game, leaves early in the first quarter with that ankle injury, is questionable to return, never returns. Marlon Humphrey, in the second quarter of this game, after a Chiefs touchdown, suffers a calf injury, limps off, goes to the medical tent, is ruled out in this game. Roquan Smith leaves this game in the second quarter with a hamstring injury. He is ruled out. Nate Wiggins, in the fourth quarter, suffers an elbow injury. He's questionable to return, never returns. He's carted to the locker room. But none of those injuries is as big as Lamar Jackson suffering a hamstring injury with 1 minute left in the third quarter. Head coach John Harbaugh said after this game that none of those injuries is season ending. But Jonas, this team simply has been absolutely walloped by the injury bug. They suffer a 17-point loss on the road to the Chiefs. But the worst news is the 5 starters who go out with injury. Just utterly absurd.
Yeah, and it starts and stops with Lamar, with all due respect to Marlon Humphrey and Roquan Smith and Nate Wiggins and all those guys. Like, again, the Rams won a Super Bowl with Eric Weddle at safety. They also had Matthew Stafford healthy. The Ravens are such a diminished product when number 8 is out there, when number 8 is not out there, when he's out, when he's sidelined. Not a whole lot I can glean from postgame. He didn't talk to the media, which is the expectation. You're not expected to when you're hurt. Obviously what we saw inside the locker room mirrored what we saw along the sideline in the broadcast, just him having that right hamstring wrapped. John Harbaugh didn't have an update or couldn't say or didn't want to say when that hamstring got pulled or tweaked or whatever it was. His last play of that game was the 2-yard sack by, I think, George Karlaftis, and it didn't appear to me. Maybe they showed some replays, Paul, that you could fill me in on that were more damning about when exactly that injury occurred or what might have been tweaked. It was, maybe this is just me, in hindsight being a bit uncool, but there was that sprint in the first quarter on like the 3rd and 10 scramble when it looked like Lamar never really got up to full speed. He still was able to just get to the sticks, but it was a little bit weird that he didn't look like he was blazing past the guy who was catching up to him or cutting down on that angle with him. So that was maybe a little bit of a red flag early for what would come. Obviously, he didn't really come up limping from that, which is the telltale sign of any soft tissue injury. But, I guess if you want to feel good about this situation, it's that you can maybe win next week against the Texans because of just how bad they are on the offensive side of the ball. But I mean, they shut out the Titans, if I'm not mistaken, today, and they have a lot of dudes on that offense to be going against a Ravens defense that right now looks overmatched against a Chiefs offense that we thought would be fine, but not set the world on fire today. Good. So you just hope that this is not a serious injury, because if you look up coming out of the bye and you're 1-5 and you have this winnable stretch, that leaves you so little room for error against some of the teams that are on that schedule. You have to basically run the table against the AFC North. You have to, steal one against, the Packers or the Vikings. You can't do a typical Ravens thing and drop a dumb game. It's just, we won't really know until tomorrow, if then, what exactly the prognosis is for Lamar. But if you're a longtime fan of this team, you know what this team looked like in 2021 and then 2022 when he went out. Very different offense. It was a much less impressive offense, and neither of those teams could do anything in the playoffs. Only one of them got to the playoffs. And it's just, the world looks very different when Lamar Jackson is not to suit up in a game. And that stinks, because watching Lamar Jackson is a pure football experience. And now for him to be ruined, not ruined, for his day to be ruined when the game was already out of hand on a seemingly innocuous sack or tackle for loss is just a huge bummer.
Yeah, there really wasn't anything that I saw on the broadcast watching from Baltimore that I picked up on how he may have tweaked that hamstring. It did see later in the game he was sitting on the bench, and it looked like he may have had, just speculating here, but it looked like he may have had an ice pack taped to the back of his leg, right where the hamstring meets the calf muscle, and obviously was sitting on the bench the rest of the time. Giannahan said he was hobbling around a little bit in the locker room as well. Obviously, the fact that it is not season ending, as John Harbaugh said, is the most important thing, because so long as you have Lamar Jackson playing any games, you have a great chance to win those games. That is still good news. But to think that you could be starting Cooper Rush, considering what we saw from him in the preseason and training camp and in the fourth quarter of this game, and what we know about him as a player, and what we know about this Ravens team when they lose Lamar Jackson, his importance to this team, to think that you could be starting Cooper Rush for at least the next game against the Texans, and perhaps up until the bye and maybe after the bye, is a frightening thought. I by the way, I went through, even without Lamar's injury, it's just utterly absurd, the kind of injuries that this Ravens team has suffered. And Jonas, I give you credit, because you said before the season, the Ravens got lucky injury-wise, and it's not often the teams get this lucky injury-wise back-to-back years. It seems like luck has bit them back in a way that none of us expected. Remember, Jonas, when we did our ranking of the top 20 Ravens on the current roster back before training camp in the middle of the summer, we listed the 20 guys in order that we thought would have the biggest impact in 2025 as a staff. The Ravens are currently without, heading into this game, or lost over the course of this game, their number 18 player, Jair Alexander, who was a healthy scratch, but obviously that's because he missed a lot of time in training camp. Their number 17 player, Pat Ricard, who has not played in a game yet this season. Number 16, Travis Jones, who was ruled out for this game. Number 15, Kyle Van Noy, who was also ruled out for this game. Number 13, Nate Wiggins, lost in the fourth quarter. Number 8, Nnamdi Madubuike, 2 straight games he's missed. Number 6, Marlon Humphrey, goes down in the first half of this game. Number 4, Roquan Smith. And number 1, Lamar Jackson. That is a mind-boggling amount of talent to be without. And as porous as the Ravens looked in this game, like, what does what matters at this point other than them getting healthy? They had defensive issues, so many defensive issues already when guys were healthy. When Marlon Humphrey and Nnamdi Madubuike and Roquan Smith and Nate Wiggins were all healthy. Now you are potentially without all those guys. Where do you go from here?
And it's not just, our projections for them and their impact this year. It's like the dollars and cents that they paid for these guys. I mean, just going from the middle of the Ravens' annual average contract value to the top. Jair Alexander inactive today, number 14. Kyle Van Noy inactive today, number 12. Brady, number 10, at over $5 million, just to give people a sense of what these guys are owed on IR, number 10. Then it's a little bit of a break, and then you get Marlon Humphrey, number 5, $19.5 million. Roquan Smith, $20 million. Ronnie Stanley, so I guess he's 4 at $20 million. Nnamdi Madubuike, $24.5 million. Kyle Hamilton, $25.1 million. Lamar Jackson, a cool $52 million. So that is a serious chunk of change invested in these guys. This is more than Cincinnati just losing Joe Burrow. This is the Ravens losing the entire defensive infrastructure around which they've built their Super Bowl hopes. There was the expectation and the hope that even on those bad days where the offense couldn't really get anything going, and boy, those days sure seem to be happening a lot more often now than they did at any point last year, then your defense could carry you. But who is left on that defense to carry you when all of these guys are sidelined with hopefully minor soft tissue injuries? The pass rush can't get home. We've seen just how beat up this run defense can be by teams that actually want to take advantage of them inside, which the Chiefs really only showed a kind of passing interest in doing in that second half. It's just no game wreckers. This team talked all offseason. I thought it was kind of silly to talk about just how much they were going to emphasize taking the ball away when it's a skill, but only to a degree. Like, you give credit.
Yeah, it's so much luck.
You give credit to the Bills for usually being near the top of the league in takeaways, but they also those guys also have done a good job at limiting turnovers, and the Ravens also had trouble with that today, from fumbles to the interception to turning over on downs. You're just kind of left shrugging as to what exactly this team is going to hang its hat on, because Tyler Loop made a couple kicks today, but there was also a kick return to the 50-yard line. There was a kick that was botched a couple times by Rasheen Ali that led to them starting with suboptimal field position. So it's a pretty bleak picture. It's just I didn't get a chance to hang around the locker room that for that long today because of how long the post game presser took with John Harbaugh and Kyle Hamilton and Justice Hill. But from talking to Gian Hahn, who was in there, it sounded like it was just a lot of hushed tones, position groups huddling, some guys not wanting to talk. It's just, you don't feel good about this. And the last time the Ravens got blown out by this much, 2021 against the Bengals, no one of this magnitude got hurt, and they were able to bounce back and looked like a playoff team pretty close. The barrier to entry for this Ravens team feels so much higher than it did for that team.
Yeah, I mean, look, the season is not over in week 4. No team season is over in week 4. But the road to climb back into this thing is so steep, especially if you are missing some of the 5 players that you lost in this game for any stretch of time. What was the mood like? You were in the press conference with John Harbaugh. What was the mood like from head coach John Harbaugh after this one?
He's never really totally downcast with all this. Maybe that was just, him not knowing how serious some of these injuries are, and thus not wanting to let that influence how optimistic he can be about this team. Even when it came to the matter of Nnamdi Madubuike, who he was asked about again today, he didn't have an update on that. So I guess we'll try again on Monday to see exactly where we stand with that. But there were some acknowledgments that this team is not where it should be, that certain guys are not doing enough of the right things, and that extends even to the coaching staff. I asked him, John Harbaugh talked about how the game script kind of got out of hand, where the Ravens couldn't impose their will running the ball like we thought they would after that very impressive opening drive. And I followed up to be like, hey, well, you guys had 4 short yardage situations in that first half. You passed on 3 of them. All 3 of them you failed on. The one time you ran, you converted it. And he, reflexively said, well, yeah, we need to be better there. We need better play calls. When play calls don't work, they look bad. And I'm sure Todd Monken would tell you the same thing. So, they felt like they wanted to be aggressive. They felt like they needed to be aggressive coming into a game like this against a defense led by Steve Spagnuolo that takes as many chances as they do with the blitzes and creative coverages and stuff like that. But it felt like they were outthinking themselves at certain times. Just like, why are you lining up in shotgun on 3rd and 2? And there's no indication whatsoever that you're going to be running the ball, because Derrick Henry, the guy who was made for 3rd and 2s, 4th and 1s, is not on the field. It didn't make any sense. And if Lamar doesn't feel confident behind that offensive line, which again, the kind of shakiness with that resurfaced tonight like it did against the Lions, then why put him in a potentially compromised situation where he's going to be facing a 7-man rush with your left tackle out because Ronnie Stanley lasted only two series. So it just didn't make a lot of sense in terms of protecting your investments, sticking to your identity, doing the small things that you need to do to not get embarrassed in a game like this.
Yeah, by far the biggest reason the Ravens lost this game is because of the injuries. It's the injuries that they had coming into the game, and it's the injuries that they suffered over the course of the game. You just cannot lose that many star players, be without that many star players, and expect to beat a very good team on the road in Kansas City like that. But that being said, we saw the issues that the Ravens had been plagued by in the first 3 games. Obviously, the loss against Detroit being the most glaring of it, but the loss week 1 against the Bills, and then at times looking unstable against the Browns in their week 2 win. We saw a lot of those issues crop back up. We saw, you mentioned some of the issues on offense. I mean, some of the play calling was very predictable. I mean, I think Tony Romo was getting a little bit too crazy about mentioning the fact that Derrick Henry was not getting touches, but Derrick Henry getting 4 first half rushes was not ideal. The fact that every time Derrick Henry was on the bench and Justice Hill came into the game, you were expecting a pass. It was like clockwork. The fact that Lamar Jackson was holding on to the ball for too long. Before he got hurt in this game, this was not his best game, perhaps his worst of the 4 games so far this season. Finished 14 of 20 with an interception that, whether you blame it on Mark Andrews, and yeah, whether you blame that on Mark Andrews or not, but the lost fumble, absolutely, which was caused by the fact that he was probably holding onto the ball for too long, maybe trying to make something happen. The Chiefs, Steve Spagnuolo, deployed once again, just that quarterback spy that teams have done to Lamar over the years. It's not like this is the first time he's ever seen that, but the Lions did it to great effect last week. The Chiefs did it again to good effect. Steve Spagnuolo was throwing those bespoke blitzes again at Lamar Jackson, and he just could not figure out a way. I mean, they had Isaiah Likely back for this game, by the way. First game of the season for him. He didn't get a single target in this game. So the offense has its own issues. The defense, I thought Childs Walker, one of our good contributors on thebanner.com, put it perfectly in his tweet. He said, the defense does not have the talent or the plan to stop anyone right now. You knew you were going to be, you didn't expect to be losing Roquan Smith or Marlon Humphrey or Nate Wiggins at any points in this game, but you knew you were going to be without a lot of your horses up front. We still haven't seen a sack from Odafe Owe, guy going into a contract year. We still have not seen much push, if any, from this Ravens pass rush. And this is a Chiefs offense that has looked recently this year like nothing that we've seen from Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. This is the worst version of this Chiefs offense. They had absolutely no running game coming into this game. Patrick Mahomes was their leading rusher with 125 rushing yards in the first 3 games of the season. It was Isaiah Pacheco and Kareem Hunt doing nothing on the ground for the first 3 games, averaging about 3.5 yards per carry each. The Ravens defense got bulldozed again. And I know they're without all of the aforementioned players, but they had absolutely no plan that seemed to be working against this Chiefs offense. This defense is utterly lost, and the fact that they are now without several star players just makes this issue so much worse. It just makes everything so much worse.
Yeah, we've got ourselves a mid-off next week with the Texans offense against the Ravens defense. So can't wait to write
That's
about
how
that.
we felt coming into this. We were like a very stoppable force against a very movable object. The very stoppable force being the Chiefs running game, and the very movable object being the Ravens defensive line. And the Chiefs very stoppable force won this game. So who's to say that this Texans offensive line won't shut the Ravens out of it next week, and that CJ Stroud won't be touched?
Right. And to be fair to this Ravens defense, only 3.7 yards allowed. Obviously, I think some of that is offset by the kneel downs at the end of that. But you take away the 2 carries for Xavier Worthy, which went for 38 yards. That average goes even further down. So even though the Ravens weren't great in short yardage situations, I thought on a down-to-down basis they did a pretty good job defending the run. Maybe that was because they were overcommitting to it, and that opened up some of the short and intermediate stuff for Patrick Mahomes, who was just dialed in today. Again, just continues to torment the Ravens when you most expect him to, when you least expect him to. He was able to find easy answers. Andy Reid was able to find easy answers for him in the way that Lamar Jackson was not able to, in a way that Todd Monken was not able to for Lamar. You saw the trickle down effect of some of these injuries. I think on the Isaiah Pacheco, touchdown into the flat, where I think it's Keon Martin who's come in for Marlon Humphrey, is just completely bamboozled by the motion or the play action fake. I forget what it was, but is just looking at a direction in which the ball is not located, and there goes Isaiah Pacheco into the flat, and he scores. And there were certain plays that you just kind of tip your cap to on the Chiefs, like the pass up the seam in the red zone where it's a bang bang play. Mahomes gets the ball to who was it? To, I think it was Hollywood Brown, before Kyle Hamilton can zoom in and take away that throwing lane. It was awfully similar to that kind of high-low concept that the Bills used, I think, on Josh Allen's first touchdown in that game, where Roquan bites on the under route, and that opens up the throwing lane behind him. Again, Kyle Hamilton or Malachi Starks is not able to close on that in time. It just, that's good offense, good play call against whatever defense the Ravens were in. But the Ravens looked slow. They could not tackle well in that first drive. I think, but Teddy Buchanan and Roquan Smith both missed tackles on a Brashard Smith carry or touch or whatever it was on that first drive that ends up with only a field goal, but still a pretty bad omen for where they were. Roquan Smith gets hurt, allowing a completion over the middle to Travis Kelce, who did not just have his way with linebackers, but with Marlon Humphrey as well, who again had another bad game that he's going to want to put in the rearview mirror as soon as possible, health permitting. So, everyone's under the microscope. I know Zach Gore came into this game with a lot of heat that Kyle Hamilton tried to diffuse, and maybe we can talk about that. But Todd Monken hasn't really been in his bag, just in terms of where this offense has been on a down-to-down basis, on a drive-to-drive basis. John Harbaugh, doing things that you could argue are actively hurting this team or not giving them the biggest chance to win. Just, kicking a field goal in the third quarter when you absolutely need touchdowns. In addition to everything that we've pointed out in the past about him not being aggressive in certain spots where they needed to be. Him not taking a timeout on either of those 2 delay of game penalties that quickly snowball with the whatchamacallit, the penalty on Lamar for what was the penalty again that followed the two delay of game penalties?
Intentional grounding.
And the intentional grounding. Thank you. Just, do something to stabilize your team. Do something to give them the optimal chance of winning. And this coaching staff as a whole, aside from, I guess, Chris Horton, if we want to really give someone their flowers, just has not done a good enough job. And that's reflected in the fact that they are getting blown out by a Chiefs team that didn't look capable of blowing anyone out. That looks reflected by the fact they are 1-3 against, yes, like some very, very good teams, but they were by far the worst. That they were clearly the inferior team against Detroit. They were clearly the far inferior team today. And, now they are going to have to fight for at least the next couple of weeks with one hand tied behind their back, because the injury bug, like you said, Paul, has finally bit them in the ass.
Yeah, there's just no reason that a team, we said this about the defense, but this goes for the whole team. There's no reason that a team this talented should be losing a game like this, that should be absolutely getting wiped off the field like this. Well, I want to get into the Kyle Hamilton comments in just a bit, but you mentioned the aggressiveness of John Harbaugh kicking that field goal late in the game when they could have gone for it on 4th and 5. The moment earlier in the game where John Harbaugh was aggressive, and I disagreed with it in some ways. I know the go for it bot, the Ben Baldwin bot, would probably say in this instance to go for it. It was when the Ravens were down 13-7 with 3 minutes left to go before halftime. It's 4th and 1 from their own 41. The Ravens go for it. Maybe worse than the decision to go for it was the play call. No Derrick Henry in the game. Justice Hill is in, so you know it's going to be a pass play on 4th and 1. But Justice Hill is motioned out of the backfield before the ball is even snapped. So you definitely know it's going to be a pass play unless Lamar is going to take it for a keeper. Of course, Steve Spagnuolo brings the blitz because that is what Steve Spagnuolo does. And Lamar just heaves it out of bounds. And the Ravens turn the ball over on downs, give the Chiefs another opportunity to score right before halftime. Chiefs take advantage of it and take a 20-7 lead at that point. Not ideal. And when you go for it in that kind of instance and you don't get it, it reeks of desperation. At that point, it definitely was a moment of desperation, and it did not pay off. Let's go to the Kyle Hamilton conversation, though, because we didn't have a chance to talk about on this podcast what Kyle Hamilton said to the media on Thursday. He was asked about the job that Zach Orr is doing as defensive coordinator, and he said, quote, "I feel like sometimes Ravens fans can be a little bit spoiled. Just the amount of success that this franchise has had. We lose 5 games and the world's about to end. I think on Zach, it's unfair to put all the blame on him when there's 11 guys out there on the field that are playing their hearts out. He's put us in the right positions. It's just a matter of doing the right stuff." I think at the time, I understood what he was saying. I think there were a lot of different ways he could have put that. And I think he probably, whether he came to the realization by himself or because of people he talked to or PR or whatever, regretted those comments. And tonight he walked them back after the game. What did Kyle Hamilton have to say about what he said on Thursday?
Yeah, before we get into that, I think that the person who you would expect to be the least online would be Kyle Hamilton. Like, he's got plenty going for him. He doesn't need to worry about what some, I don't want to say fringe of Ravens fans is thinking, but like, I wouldn't be acknowledging if I were him.
Yeah,
like,
stay above the fray.
Right. Well put. And so today, obviously without Lamar talking, we got Justice Hill and we got Kyle Hamilton, because who else on the defense was going to talk? And so he opened his presser not by taking a question, but by standing up there and for 2+ minutes, basically apologizing first for the state of the Ravens defense, saying that, I know fans know that we need to fix it, and we know that we need to fix it. He apologized also for basically the characterization of Ravens fans as spoiled. Just basically said, like, he understands that there is an expectation. There's a lineage of defensive greatness in this franchise. And, he recognizes that fans are upset that that is not being upheld. So good for him. Good on him for standing up there in front of, a relatively small media corps and just saying what was on his mind. Obviously the last thing that we need is this Ravens fan base going at war with Kyle Hamilton, who is just such a gentleman, such a ball player, such a tough cookie. So hopefully, that little spat is behind us. Although I think Ravens fans all fans have pretty good memories. And I think those comments are going to kind of linger right until this defense turns things around, if they ever turn things around, because, we were all sold this expectation that was propagated by players and coaches and media, like that there wouldn't be a month that looked like this, where they were blowing leads to the Bills and, unable to really stop the Browns ground game, or getting, again, dog walked in the fourth quarter by the Lions, or just having no answer whatsoever for the Chiefs over the final 3 quarters today. And, certainly it's going to be on him to shoulder a lot more than what he's been asked to do in Baltimore before, because if Roquan's out for long, then, or if he's out for any amount of time, then it's going to be Kyle Hamilton, who is not just having to, hold the hand of Malachi Starks, who again had a seemingly rough game today out there, but also he's going to be the guy wearing the green dot, which means you're getting basically every single level of that defense organized. And there might be a lot of guys out there who have played no more than 10 to 20 snaps in a game in their entire career. If Keon Martin wasn't expected to make this team, and he might be the starting slot corner in week 4, having to guard
mind-boggling.
in week 5, having to guard Nico Collins, on some, crazy deep dig or something. That's just where this Ravens roster is. So it was magnanimous of Kyle. It was noble of him to just acknowledge that, there were mistakes made, hopefully by both sides, for the fans who went a little bit over the top in reacting to him, when the question that he was reacting to in the first place was about Zach Orr, not about like the state of Ravens fandom. So we'll see. I think Kyle Goon is writing a column on Kyle and these remarks, and just what it kind of says about this team, that this guy is having to put so much of the blame on himself, and how things have gone so terribly out of sorts. But credit to him for standing up there and taking some of the blame. But there's not a lot of Kyle Hamiltons on this roster. There are not a lot of Kyle Hamiltons in the NFL who can come in and fix this defense the way that it needs to be fixed.
Yeah, I mean, if he's out there next week or beyond next week with some of the guys that he was out there today, there's not much Kyle Hamilton could do. I mean, it was some of the defensive players that got significant snaps in this game. You mentioned Keon Martin, undrafted rookie free agent, who immediately came in for Marlon Humphrey and was your slot corner. Jake Hummel got snaps at inside linebacker, guy who was pretty much reserved for special teams, had one defensive snap this season coming into this game. Trenton Simpson had to come in when Roquan Smith was out. Brent Urban got elevated from the practice squad, or got signed to the 53, I should say, before this game, and played a significant role in this defense. Josh Tupou, somebody who the Ravens added their practice squad earlier this week, was playing significant snaps. This was a defense that was completely decimated by injuries over the course of this game. But at the same time, this is an organization that, I don't know if they've copyrighted this phrase, if they've trademarked this phrase, but has used this phrase so much over the years. Nobody cares, work harder. I saw somebody before the game when I was getting breakfast this morning wearing that shirt. That's what fans expect, because that is what the standard that you have set. And it comes with a lot of expectations. But fans right now don't want to hear excuses. They might get excuses if this team is going to be without as many star players as they were today. But what they want right now is for this team to at least be playing average ball right now, and they are not doing so. And Jonas,
Paul, just to kind of contextualize where this defense is, Anthony Reinhard on Twitter, who does a great job with DataViz, has some of the snap counts out for this defense. And to your point, just about where in the world we are with the state of everything. Aeneas Peebles, 9 snaps. Basil Okoye, 22 snaps. CJ Okoye, 22 snaps. Adafe Owe, 33 snaps. Jacob Hummel, 26 snaps. David Ajabo, 17 snaps. Trent Simpson played basically half the game because of the Roquan injury. Keon Martin played over half the game, 37 snaps because of injury. TJ Tampa, 18 snaps. Brent Urban got over half the snaps in this game. John Jenkins got over 60% of the snaps in this game. John Jenkins is used to this kind of workload because he was kind of a 2-down player in for the Raiders last year, but they brought him in to be a situational nose tackle. They didn't expect him to be the dude up front. And to his credit, he, along with Tupou and Okoye, I think, did a good job holding the point attack. Brent Urban got some knockback too. But these are the guys you can afford for a couple $1 million, if that, because what they are giving you is, relatively speaking, the easiest thing to deliver, which is solid run defense, a warm body up front that could occupy a couple blockers. They are not giving you any pass rush juice. And a little surprising to see that Peebles only got 9 snaps because of, what we thought he could bring to the table. But, the Chiefs were just so good about taking just nickel and diming the Ravens all day, that maybe the Ravens didn't felt like there were enough opportunities for Peebles to be in, considering what his limitations are. And it's just a bad scene all around.
So this goes back to a conversation that we had in the offseason. You've mentioned the term stars and scrubs, and that's how a lot of competitive teams in the NFL that have a quarterback on their second or third contract have to operate, because they have a guy who is making such a huge portion of their salary cap, and they might have a couple other of those guys that they're paying huge amounts of money to, that they then have to fill out the rest of the roster with a lot of guys that are making close to the league minimum. We've seen the Ravens do this before and get away with it. I mean, I think 2023 was a great example of the Ravens utilizing this strategy to perfection. I mean, some of the guys that they added over the course of the summer or during training camp were not making a whole lot of money. Jadeveon Clowney and Ronald Darby and those guys were not making a ton of money, but the Ravens stayed relatively healthy. They didn't have to play huge amount of snaps. They didn't have to play beyond their role. And when they did come in, they were solid enough. Right now, you're seeing the downside of this stars and scrub strategy, because you have a quarterback who's making $260 million. You have a defensive tackle who's on a $100 million contract who is currently out and could be out for whoever knows how long with that neck injury. You have a slot cornerback who's making close to $100 million who's out. You have a starting inside linebacker who's making $100 who is out.
$100 million.
And what's that?
You said $100.
100. He's making exactly $100. What a contract. You have all these guys right now who are hurt, and some of those guys have underperformed, but all these guys who are right now hurt is forcing you to play guys that you never wanted, never expected to have to play. And then you've also seen decimation down the roster, up and down the roster. I mean, the Ravens had 11 draft picks and they lost 2 of those guys before the season even started to injury. So you were just seeing these guys that are not meant to play this big a role be forced into action and have to jump into things and immediately be expected to make an impact. And it's just not happening.
Yeah, and I think a couple points. I think we saw Water start to find its level with some of these guys. I think Cheeto Awuzie had a pretty rough game. I think you saw that long speed that he used to have was clearly not there today against the speed that the Chiefs have out wide with Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown. That was disappointing to see him, trailing the play as often as he was. And to your point about the stars and scrubs approach, obviously it's not really a phrasing that we endorse, because a lot of these guys who are on rookie contracts are not scrubs. It's just a general kind of catch-all term that we're using to reflect what they're being paid like. The John Harbaugh term that I think is probably I've embraced the most in talking about this team and writing about this team is like a force multiplier. Lamar Jackson, force multiplier. Derrick Henry, force multiplier. Roquan Smith in his prime, force multiplier. But just some quick math for you, Paul. What's 3 times 0?
0.
What's 5 times 0?
0.
What's 10 times 0?
0.
If you are a force multiplier and you're playing with guys who offer nothing beyond a replacement level player, then it is very, very tough to actually see like the awesome value of these guys, especially when those guys that you're relying on being force multipliers aren't multiplying as much as they once did. Roquan wasn't having a good game. Marlon was having a terrible game, like we mentioned. Broderick Washington was never a force multiplier, but we mentioned him, as a guy who was being paid $5 million a year to at least hold up against the run and offer a little bit pass rush juice. And he came into this week as PFF's lowest graded run defender. So you just get into the athletic arithmetic of how can you expect this defense to be anywhere close to good when you have a couple stars surrounded by guys who just aren't ready for whatever reason. And I think coaching has a lot to do with it, to contribute in a way that will help lift this team up. It's a situation where maybe by week 13, you feel a lot better about some of these young guys who are getting reps right now. But in a game like this, in an atmosphere like this, against a team that uses so much eye candy like the Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes is just being a supercomputer out there, guys just had their heads spinning.
You could make a case that the Ravens' biggest rookie contributor right now is one of their 6th round picks, Tyler Loop.
Yeah.
He's been great, other than the A couple of times he's kicked it out of bounds and kicked it short of the landing zone. Malachi Starks has had some gaffes in coverage in the first 4 games. Mike Green hasn't really done anything in the pass rush game, has been asked to play a bigger role the last 2 weeks than the Ravens, again, were planning on him playing. I think the Ravens were not planning on playing Malachi Starks back before Darius Washington got hurt, but that was the state of things. I think Mike Green at this point needs to get stronger. I think he is not a complete player, and we're starting to see that. 3rd round pick, Emory Jones Jr. is yet to see the practice field, let alone the playing field. And Teddy Buchanan has been asked to start at inside linebacker and just does not look ready to be a contributor. So, and 5th round pick Carson Vincent is a project who made the roster and is going to be probably a healthy scratch for every game this season. Bilal Kone got hurt before the game, or before the season. So, not exactly the best results, but it's super early, and we're looking at a rookie class that was not supposed to play this big a role because the Ravens had too deep a roster, and now these guys are being asked to play a bigger role, and it's just going the way that you would expect when you are relying on rookies.
It's difficult because this is a unique spot for this franchise that they haven't been, I think, 1-3 since 2015, which was a just terribly injury plagued season. I don't think Joe Flacco finished that season healthy, if my memory is correct. John Harbaugh kept his job after that one. I don't know when the first head to roll would be during a season like this, but if things don't change, then that bye week is looking like an awfully cushy opportunity for you to make some big widespread changes. We've already seen some heads roll across the league. We've seen wide receiver coaches fired. We've seen change ups in coordinators getting moved from the booth to the sideline. I wrote about it in our incident analysis that went up after the game. Like week 4 last year, I think you could have been more up. I don't know. It's tough to place myself where it was going into that primetime game against the Bills, but the Ravens were 1-2. They had a okay win against the Cowboys, kind of like they had a good to okay win against the Browns in week 2. But that was a launchpad game for the Ravens. They, I think, won 4 of their next 5. By early November, they were like 8-3. And it was easy to envision that team being able to do some stuff in the postseason. And you come into a game like this where, it's a Chiefs team that has an incredible crowd behind its back. Xavier Worthy coming back, Patrick Mahomes, Steve Spagnuolo, Andy Reid. But the Ravens were favored for a reason. They were what, close to field goal favorites in this game, at least when I checked a couple of days before. And now you get not the worst case scenario, because the worst case scenario is Lamar being done for this year, other guys being done for this year, but he's out indefinitely because we don't know the seriousness of it. Hamstrings can be awfully finicky things, and maybe a turnaround comes next week, but then you get a reality check the week after that, because that is a Rams team that beat the Indianapolis Colts, who were looking like one of the AFC's best teams, and have the weapons out wide to just toast a Ravens defense that could be without Nate Wiggins for the foreseeable future, Marlon Humphrey for the foreseeable future. We don't know if Cheeto Awuzie is up to the task of stopping the Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua and all these guys. That Rams defense has certainly found a way to get by with not really a whole lot of household names besides Jared Verse. So it's going to be, these are probably the most pivotal, most important 2 weeks of the Ravens season just coming up in terms of determining what exactly is this next course of action, because I don't think you can have this team coming out of the bye at 1-5 and not having done anything, and being able to turn on sports talk radio in Baltimore without hearing just the phone lines lit up with profanities and just insane rants about how something needs to change, probably starting with the head coach. Not that
and Jonas, you're going to hate me for this, but the parallels between the Ravens and the Orioles right now, whose season ended today, it's striking the similarities. I mean, there are, you talk about the Orioles going into the 2025 season with World Series hopes, and they go off the rails so quickly that they fire their manager Brandon Hyde by mid-May, and then the season is able to stabilize only slightly the rest of the way. They trade all their guys at the trade deadline. It turns into a disaster. Their season ends on September 28th with a below 500 record. They also had myriad injuries along the way to key players. But at the same time, like the same conversation that we're having with this team, the injury, you should not let some of these guys off the hook for these injuries. Like the Orioles, a large reason that their season went down the toilet was injuries, but it's not all the reasons. And there were significant coaching issues along the way between the manager, between the assistant coaches. And you're looking at this Ravens team right now and saying, Todd Monken is not scripting plays the way he was a year ago and 2 years ago. Zach Orr has still yet to string together a stretch of games where he is elevating the level of this defense. There are issues in the coaching staff. There are issues on the field that go beyond injuries right now with this Ravens team. So it's ugly right now, Jonas. We're going to take a look around the division and talk about what went on with the Browns, the Steelers, and the Bengals on the other side of another quick break.
For the 5th year in a row, Toyota is the best resale value brand according to Kelley Blue Book's KBB.com, including the 2025 Grand Highlander, best in resale value for midsize SUVs. Toyota, let's go places.
Looking for the ultimate game day spot? Head to Guinness, Baltimore. We've got fresh pints, the biggest screen south of the stadium, and the perfect place to cheer on the home team. Game time is Guinness time. All right, Jonas. Steelers won this morning in Dublin. Have you been to Ireland, by the way?
Despite my red hair, no, I have not.
I thought you would have made the trip at some point. We got to change that at some point. Get the Ravens to play in. I know they've played in London, but get the Ravens to play in Dublin. That'd be sick. Steelers won in Dublin, Ireland. They beat the Vikings. They're 3-1. The Bengals are 2-1. They play the Broncos tomorrow night on Monday Night Football, and the Browns lost another stinker today to the Lions, 34-10. Browns are not going to be a competition for the Ravens in this division, and frankly, as long as Joe Burrow is out, I don't think the Bengals are either. But we are once again in a situation where the Pittsburgh Steelers are punching above their weight with a veteran quarterback who should probably be retired, and Mike Tomlin dragging this defense to an above average level. And it's looking right now like the Ravens are going to have to overcome a Steelers team that is doing better than they should in order to win this division.
Yeah, I mean, this has been a pretty quick reframing of can the Ravens, us talking about can the Ravens start the season 8-0? Can the Ravens get the number 1 seed? To can the Ravens come back and stop the Aaron Rodgers-led Steelers from?
We've lowered the bar so much in the last 3 weeks.
It's in the basement. It's where the kids and weapons are. Spoiler alert.
Not the kids and weapons, the kids in weapons.
In weapons.
I still haven't seen it.
Yeah. Oh boy, sorry about that. It's that they're going to have to. I think I saw a tweet from citing ESPN Analytics or ESPN Research saying that even if the Ravens lost today, they would still be, I think, over 50% odds to win this division, which I guess is just reflective of the fact that the Bengals don't have Burrow, the Steelers defense until today, and even near the end of that game, what has been trash. Not a lot of love for Aaron Rodgers and that offensive line, and then just the Browns are the Browns, and even though I think we can probably expect a relatively close game with the Ravens, go to Cleveland. It just, I guess it's already maybe become a 2-horse race between the Ravens and the Steelers. But I mean, again, we're just wildly speculating because we don't know what this Ravens defense, or we don't know what this Ravens team is going to look like as soon as next Sunday. It could be a roster that when you look at those 22 starters is a bottom third team in the NFL, if not lower, just because of the guys that you're having to plug in for these key cornerstone players. So the Ravens are obviously up against it. I'll be curious to see how the odds shift after a defeat this thorough and a win as perhaps surprising as the Steelers, and them getting to 3-1 with not smoke and mirrors, but kind of by the skin of their teeth is a very Steelers way to do it.
Yeah,
and the Ravens,
we shouldn't be
failing
surprised.
this fantastically 2 weeks in a row now does not engender the season with good vibes.
Who's got a better than award this week goes to the Chiefs. Congrats, you're 2-2. Jonas, we last week we did grades. We graded each other on the podcast. How would you grade me today? Scale of 1 to 10.
You did fine. You PFF graded like 70.9.
Okay, is that blue or green for them?
I think it's green. I think blue is elite, right?
Yeah, so not elite. I'm not elite. Just good. Just fine. All right, I'll take it. We will have another show for you Thursday to preview the Ravens game against the Houston Texans. In the meantime, we have so much more coverage on thebanner.com where you can subscribe $1 for 6 months.
Shout out to the Banner.
Paul, if they
Jonas,
fire John Harbaugh, we're gonna have to find it. We're gonna have to find a new sound drop.
don't say that. Just don't say that. Don't put these things into the universe, Jonas. I worked so hard to add that rap song air horn to that bit there. At Jonas_Shaffer is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Kyle Kuhn, Gianna Hahn are also in Kansas City. So much more coverage from this one. Whew, it's going to be a long week until we get to the Texans game, and it's going to be a lot of injury updates over the course of these next 6 days. So stay tuned for all of that and much, much more. Thanks so much for tuning in. Write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I will read it out here on the show. For Jonas Shaffer, I'm Paul Mancano. We'll catch you next time.